My name is Shannon. I'm a solicitor here at EMG Solicitors, and today I'm going to talk about settlement agreements and settlement agreements in the context of redundancy situations. So most employers will be familiar with settlement agreements in the context of disputes. If you have an employee who's underperforming or misbehaving, a settlement agreement is a useful means of recording exit terms with the employee. They can, however, be used equally as effectively in a redundancy situation. A recap on redundancies. Redundancies typically arise in three situations. Firstly, where an entire business stops, it ceases. Secondly, where you may have one office or one office location or a relocation, a redundancy situation will apply. And quite often, and more commonly nowadays, is the situation where an employer's need for as many employees diminishes. So they're all redundancy situations, and redundancy, remember, is a fair reason for bringing an employment relationship to an end. But the problem is that there's a lot of pitfalls, there's a lot of traps for the unwary, and a settlement agreement essentially is an alternative or as a means of reducing exposure to those risks. In a traditional redundancy situation where a formalised procedure needs to be followed, there are a number of obligations on the part of an employer. You need to warn your employees that redundancy is in the offing. You need to consult with them, and that will involve a consideration of things like selection pools, selection criteria, and then ultimately you may, as an employer, have to entertain an appeal as well. All time consuming, all potentially problematic, and if you slip up at any point on that journey, the risk is exposure to an unfair dismissal claim, and that's where a settlement agreement comes into play. So what is a settlement agreement? Well, it's a legal document. It contains an offer on the part of the employer, usually including a termination payment as an inducement or to persuade the employee to sign up to the agreement. As far as the employee is concerned, the agreement involves them making a number of promises, the most important of which are that they're not going to present you with a claim to an employment tribunal after they've gone, and that is the real benefit of a settlement agreement as far as an employer is concerned. Clearly, an employee is much more likely to sign your settlement agreement if there's something in it for them. Now, that could be a slightly enhanced financial package, or it could be a non-monetary benefit. A number of my clients will include provision for employment reference, which for some employees can be worth its weight in gold. But it's a legal document. It's usually prepared by a solicitor. It's a requirement of the enforceability of any settlement agreement that the employee gets advice from an independent lawyer, and consequently it's traditional for employers to make an offer to contribute towards the employee's legal fees in getting that advice. It's important, as far as you are concerned as an employer, that they get advice, they take it seriously, and that it's signed off by an independent qualified solicitor. But at that point you have a settlement agreement. The great benefit of that is the reassurance that you're protected from any claims. And hopefully you've saved yourself an awful lot of time, you've saved yourself a lot of exposure to risk that otherwise would be present if you went down the traditional redundancy route. I'm sometimes asked by employers, well, what happens if the employee knocks me back? What happens if they don't accept the settlement proposal? Well, in that case, there's nothing more you can do unless you're willing to improve the package, enhance the deal. You're then back at square one. You've got to go the traditional route. but offering the settlement agreement in the first place can quite often, in the majority of cases in a redundancy situation, produce the result that you want. I hope that's been helpful. If you have any questions, either in relation to the redundancy process or settlement agreements, please feel free to contact me at graham.shannon@emgsolicitors.com.